What scares you? More specifically, what are you afraid of? Because if you face what you're afraid of, you might just find yourself, and that's what we're going to talk about with today's special guest on the Beautiful Mind Show. Your mind is a beautiful thing, but if left unattended, it can get ugly real quick. If you're not constantly curating the content your mind consumes on a daily basis, then your surroundings will dictate your daily thoughts, habits, behaviors, and actions. This show has only one goal: to leave your mind more beautiful than it was when you arrived. Welcome to the Beautiful Mind Show. Welcome to today's show. I'm on with Holly Fox, and Holly and I are going to interview an amazing guest. Good to see you, Holly. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you too. I hear we're facing some fears today, so I'm excited.
I think so. We're just going to place you in a box of spiders and see what happens. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
You're cool with that? No problem. We got a box of spiders and a box of snakes. We should be fine today.
Yeah, those don't bother me. Now, if you threw some cockroaches in there, we'd have a whole nother show going on today.
Yeah, I like it. Well, we're not doing any of those things, but it's still going to be an awesome show. People are disappointed now, Holly. They're like, damn it. It might get us more views if we put you in a box of spiders, but I think let's just call it for now. Our guest today is a friend of mine, Mr. Peter Scott. What's up, Peter? Glad to have you on today. Good to see you, brother, man.
What's up, Jason? Thank you for having me, bro.
Dude, so good to have you on. I know you're the founder of Fearless Coach Academy. You help people by facing their fears and learning more about who they are and what they're meant to be. And dude, you're such a good guy. I mean, you and I had the privilege of meeting. Like, I had just done an event, or I can't remember if I was about to do it or just done it. We had just gotten ready to do this thing called High Octane Adventures, where we do rally car racing, and we jumped off Tiger Mountain and did paragliding off the top of this mountain, and we did all this stuff. And somebody was like, you need to meet this guy, Peter. He just went shark diving in Mexico, right? And it was like, you guys need to talk. And I'm like, hell yeah, we do. I can't wait to meet this guy. And like, you know, you and I are brothers from another mother, in the sense of like, we go on these crazy, wild adventures, trips, etc., to go learn about what we're capable of. And I think that's just connected us in a really good way because you do this stuff. What got you into that, man?
Dude, my whole life was controlled by fear. Like, I think that was the biggest thing. Like, my biggest driver was trying to figure out and how to solve kind of the challenges, the insecurities, the doubts, the fears that I had. And the more that I connected with people that had like the life, the relationship, the health that I aspired to, I saw that they pushed themselves outside of their comfort zone. They traveled to places, they put themselves in experiences that made them break through limitations that they had, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally. And that just drove me. So that's kind of what inspired me to get started myself.
Super good. By the way, if you're scared of things and you're watching today's podcast and you're like, yeah, occasionally there's something I'm afraid of, do me a favor and say occasionally scared. Occasionally in the chat, because for crying out loud, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I think it's good to face something and to, you know, to scare yourself a little bit occasionally. Yeah, I mean, Holly, what have you learned about that in your days of scaring yourself and facing your fears?
Oh my gosh. It's been kind of crazy over the last like 3 years. Ever since knowing you, Jason, you're always pushing me past my fears, to be honest with you. But that takes me to a whole nother level in my business and in my company and with my own kids and my own family, you know, just facing them and, you know, knocking them out of the park and doing it with a great group of people. You know, when you have friends that are doing it too, that's always a good day.
Yeah. So what do you want to ask Peter, Holly? What would be something you want to ask about fear?
What made you decide to kind of break through all of this and really start your journey with it? Like, what was holding you back that you felt like needed to kind of push through?
Love the question.
What specific? What were you afraid of, Peter?
You know what? Here's the thing that I think it would be really like, it's important to kind of notice this, because there's good forms of fear and there's like bad forms of fear. I call it rational fears and irrational fears. Like, a rational fear keeps us alive, right? If we're in imminent danger, if we are being chased by a tiger, then that fight or flight response, that's a good thing. Are you
often chased by tigers, by the way? Is that a normal scenario?
And here's the thing. We're not, but we think that we are. You know what I mean? Like, metaphorically, our irrational fears that keep us from living, it feels like we're actually being chased from a tiger, but none of us are, right? Yeah. And that's the crazy part, is like, fear comes up when we feel like we're in imminent danger. But most of the time, for most of us, we're not in a lot of imminent physical danger. It's it's the anticipation of something happening, you know what I mean, that's scary or outside of our comfort zone. So that's a really important distinction that, you know, for me, Holly, I identified early on, because I was, before what I'm doing today, right? I'm helping coaches grow their businesses. I'm helping entrepreneurs and executives break through their fears. Before that, and Jason, I don't even think you know this, man.
No, I don't.
I used to work in investment banking, of all things.
What?
Perfect. Perfect.
You never knew that, right?
No, I just totally did not.
Yeah, I was in investment banking. I was in Chicago. I was working for an investment bank there, working 80, 90 hours a week. And I was making good money, but I was miserable.
Yeah.
And I was afraid to leave that career because my family approved of it.
Sure.
Because society approved of it. And I had all these things where I was like, oh my gosh, what if I leave this and I lose the love or the approval of my family? So that, Holly, is kind of what sparked me on this journey of recognizing.
I bet people can relate to that one. If you can, by the way, comment relate. Because I know lots of people that like, man, if I make that change, somebody won't approve of it. Man, can we be honest for just a second, you guys, for you guys that are either watching live or listening, is that how many decisions do you make just out of fear of somebody's judgment of your decision? Dude, that's big. That's big. Guilty, by the way, of that one. Guilty.
Oh,
same here too, right? For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And
dude, that's so good.
Specific to, you know, for me, specific to starting a business or growing a business, I remember there was a moment where I was seeking like love and approval from my family, like many of us do. I was going to go to a family reunion and announce to my family that I had just launched a business. I left investment banking. I was writing a book. Like, I was so excited, right? I was so excited for them to be like, Peter, that's amazing. We love you. We support you. Go chase your dreams, right? That's the thought that I had.
Yeah.
Not exactly how it played out.
That was not their response?
Not even close. And this is the thing is like, you know, I share this and I'll never forget, one family member looked at me and she goes, Peter, if you publish this book, if you launch this business, we will disown you.
Straight up said disown you.
Because you're ruining the family name. You're ruining the family name.
Oh.
Right?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, you are Peter Scott the fourth. Did I see that on there correctly? Like, there's a fourth in there. Which, speaking of, I'm just being really honest, man. Like, that is an interesting thing. I've met some thirds and some fourths and whatever. And like, you mentioned family name, and that does, you know, really carry when you're a Peter Scott 4, right? It's like there's some history with that people say there's a certain thing to uphold and how you want to operate. And I mean, I don't know, man. If you guys are doing something your family didn't approve of, do me a favor and say me in the chat. You know, I don't have that. Like, my parents were excited as entrepreneurs, Peter. So I don't know what that specific fear is like, but I definitely understand the fear of the disapproval of your family is tremendous. Like, it would rip me apart if they didn't approve of what I was doing. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. And here's the thing is like, when that happens, or if that happens, it's generally from an actual kind of fear-based love, right? They didn't want to squash my dreams. They wanted me to be safe. And that's, I think that's a really important thing is right. Entrepreneurship is not safe at times, right? It's scary. It's there's uncertainty, there's unknown. But by doing that, they looked at it as going, oh my gosh, we don't want you to hurt yourself. We don't want you to struggle. We don't want you to do that. We want you to follow the straight and narrow. And so I'm very grateful to have like received that from a place of like, they're coming from a place of love, even though it didn't serve me. And I had a decision I had to make. Do I let my need to get their approval override my need to help people? And I think that's something that a lot of people, whether you're a business owner or not, right? Whether anyone who has a vision that goes outside of the norm, you're going to have to be faced with that question. And that holiday question, that's what started me on this journey. That motivated me.
Dude. Peter, I want you to answer this question, but I'm going to give you a hot second to think about it because I got to take a quick break. But what I want to do is, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I want to find out what are the top fears of most entrepreneurs when we come back. We got to take a short break and we'll be back after this quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Would you like to have an even more beautiful mind? Well, we'd like you to have one, and we actually created a 7-day Beautiful Minds Challenge, which is a little bit of a choose your own adventure challenge for just 7 days. And I really think you can do anything for 7 days. It's definitely not easy, but it will be simple for you to get access to it. All you have to do is comment anywhere on this video or send me a message on social media that says 7-day, and I'll send you immediate access to not only our Beautiful Minds Facebook group, but also our Beautiful Minds Challenge, where you can go through 3 different areas: your mental health, your emotional health, and your physical health, and get challenges in each of those areas that'll help you get a handle on each of those areas inside your life to give you more control over what you want to do every single day. So do me a favor, comment 7-day or send me a message on any social media, and I'll make sure I give you access to our exclusive community group as well as access to the challenge. Thanks so much, and now back to the show.
From West.
What was that last part, Holly? I missed what you said there.
Oh, I was asking, are you originally from the Midwest? Peter?
Me, I went to Ohio State for undergrad. My whole family went there, but I lived in Connecticut, grew up on the East Coast. Yeah.
Awesome. So Peter, we're talking with Peter Scott, and we're talking
Great,
about
thank you.
how to face your fears and what are some of the things that people do. The question I asked you right before the break, Peter, was what are the things most business owners, entrepreneurs, what are they most afraid of? What would you say is the number one thing you deal with people and help them to break through?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I see with entrepreneurs is the fear of judgment and the fear of rejection are 2 really, really big ones, because they hit so much some of our childhood wounding, some of our insecurities, our natural at times lack of self-worth or being fear of not being loved. The fear of rejection and the fear of judgment come up a lot. A lot of people label it differently. They call it different names, right? We call it the fear of failure. But failing, right? The act of failing is not so much scary. It's the people's perception of us failing. That's what people are really scared.
Because I was going to say, like, I know that's kind of a weird thing. Like, I'm not afraid to fail. And I think, dude, you just nailed something for me even that I've recently come to discover, right? Is like, I'm not really afraid to fail. Or I've heard this other thing of like, I'm like, oh, well, no, people aren't really afraid to fail. It's afraid of success, right? Like maybe that's it. They fear success, but you nailed it. It's the perception, right? It's the rest of it. It's not the like, I fear that failure, I fear that success. It's like what's the perception that goes with that fear, or the perception of what goes with that success. If I have to call somebody and say, if I have to call my wife and say, by the way, we lost the house. By the way, we're moving into a 1-bedroom apartment. By the way, the business didn't work. Like it's the rest that goes with that fear. Is that what I'm understanding?
100%. And I think it's getting aggravated and exaggerated even more now today because of things like social media, right? What a great platform we have now to be able to do interviews like this and share our message with the world. And there's a lot of keeping up with the Joneses, comparison. Many people on social media are comparing their behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reels, right? Most people share the new house and the new car, and those things are great to celebrate, share those things, but we don't share often the challenges that we have in our families or in our businesses and things like that. And that creates more insecurity and more doubt and more kind of fear of failure, but it's really that fear of rejection or judgment.
What would be some tips? How can you give me some tools that, like, if you're a business owner and you do worry about being judged by other people, like if you fail, what other people will think, what would be some top tools for you, Peter, that you give to entrepreneurs? I'm sure you've got some hot tips. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might even have a challenge on this. Is that what I'm understanding? That
I do, yeah. And I'll share that for sure, Jason, with your community. I got to make sure it's up and running, but it's a 5-day.
That's all right. If I can talk you into sharing that challenge with our Beautiful Minds crew, I will do everything. If you guys want his challenge, if you want it, what's it called, by the way?
The Face Your Fear Challenge.
Face Your Fear Challenge. So if I can talk Peter into it, how many of you would like to have that fear challenge? Do me a favor and type fear if you'd like to have access to that challenge. Tell me about some of the tools that maybe are in that challenge or that you give entrepreneurs to face their fears. Peter, what do you do?
I love it. So one thing is that I believe that, everything that we desire is on the other side of our fear, right? So the more that you run towards your fears, the more you run towards it, the smaller it gets. If you run away from your fears, the bigger it's going to get. So the act is, how do you do the thing that's, that's a really important distinction.
Say that again, because I just want to make sure I understand it, right? Because you said I just want to make sure this hit me, because I don't know that I got it. The further you run towards it, the smaller it gets. The further you run from it, the bigger it gets. Now that's counterintuitive, right? Because no matter if you were just judged by normal perception, if this is really far away from me, it's very small. If it's very close, it's much bigger. But you just said fear works the complete opposite. You got to tell me more about that. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
100%. Fear literally gets smaller the more you run towards it, right? So let's say, for example, you're afraid of promoting yourself on social media. Well, by building the muscle of doing things like this, interviewing people, doing Facebook Lives, over time, that fear gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The problem
with the experience, right?
Yeah, when we feel that fear, we let that stop us. We let that slow us down. We feel like our feet are planted in cement and we're stuck and we can't move. And the longer that happens, the bigger that fear gets. Right? People often call it this 3-second rule. Like the moment you want to say something or you want to speak in front of a group, if you're letting more than 3 seconds pass, then that fear starts to build. So it is exactly the opposite of what we normally think.
Yeah, it's really funny, man. I might just be wired wrong or wired different, right? But like, I'm one of those people, and Peter, we've talked about your shark adventures and all this stuff. I'm one of those people, if I book it far enough away, it's like no big deal. I'm like, yeah, I'll go shark diving. And then like the hour before I get in the tank, I'm like, I'm going shark diving in an hour. This is out of control. Who committed to this? Like the closer I get to it, like I kind of wired almost the other way. But in my mind, I think this is what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm getting this wrong. What I'm hearing you say is our mind, the further away we are, makes the fear amplified, but the closer we are to actually see the detail of the fear, the smaller it can become because the closer to the truth we get to. That makes sense? I'm just trying to take what you said and make sure I heard it. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. Yeah. So you nailed it with truth, because most of the fears that we have, right, are figments of our imagination. They're paper dragon. So like to give you a tangible thing, or if the viewers a tangible thing, something you can do. One of the best things you could do is to actually take a fear that one of us has, right? And instead of pretending like it's not there or avoiding it, I actually do this on a kind of weekly, monthly basis. I'll write down that fear and I'll literally define the worst case scenario. Instead of going the opposite way, Jason, I will literally write out my worst case nightmare. If this happens and the ripple effect happens, what does this look like? And I'll write it down in painstaking detail. And what it does is it actually removes the emotional charge. It takes the emotion out of it and puts it down on paper for me to see how unlikely, number one, that's going to happen. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
That's really good.
Then what I do is I look at that and I say, okay, what are the things that I could do to prevent that worst case scenario from happening? Because there's always things that we can do, or people that we can connect with, or support we can receive to prevent that from happening. And that makes the fear smaller and smaller, right?
That's good.
Then you look at the other side and you say, okay, if this thing happens, what are the things that we could do to repair it? Maybe it's a conversation, right, that you need to have with a loved one or a client or a business partner that's hard. Right. And those are often the most important conversations for us to have. When we look at what are the things we could do to prevent the worst case scenario, or what are the things we can do to repair it if it happens, again, it makes it easier to approach that and to take that action.
I like what you said.
I love that repair part.
Yeah. I 100%, Holly. 100%. Go ahead, Holly.
Yeah, when you're talking about that, we've talked in like Little Voice Mastery to know what your fear is and to do the worst case scenario, but knowing that you can repair it, that gives you a whole nother level of being able to face that fear, knowing that there's something that you could do afterwards. I think that's huge.
Yeah. I mean, the steps I wrote down, Peter, were like, figure out what the worst case is. Ask yourself what you could do to prevent it. But then if it happens, how could you repair it? And I think that's really, like, those are steps that I have not heard before that I think are really helpful in this case of like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Well, I could die. All right. Well, how do I prevent myself from dying? Well, I could probably go with a guide who hasn't died before and has successfully taken other people. Like I kind of have a saying, like, if there's a waiver for it to be able to be done, I'm willing to do it, because like if they can get insurance for it, then I'm down. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
I don't know if we ever talked about this, Peter. There used to be a show, Richard Branson did a show where he would take people on these crazy life stretch adventures. I don't know if you ever saw the show. If anybody saw this Richard Branson's show, do me a favor and say Richard in the chat, okay? The season finale was Richard Branson and one other person. It was like there's 4 people left, and they were in this big giant like metal rolling ball. And they were like strapped into these buckles and this whole thing. And Richard was like, okay, guys, what we're going to do is they're going to push this ball off this cliff, and it's going to roll down the hill, and it's probably going to go do all these things. And basically it was a test, right? To see if they would go to do whatever lengths it took to become an entrepreneur, and Richard would like invest in them as a business owner. And so I remember at the end that they were all inside this ball, or that like Richard and another guest, they took each person one at a time, and they said, okay. And they're filming the whole thing, and they're like, all right, are you ready to do it? And then they were like, yeah, Richard, I'm ready to go. Let's do it. And then he would be like, okay, you failed. And they're like, well, what? What are you talking about? Like, I'm willing to do whatever you will go do with me. And he's like, yeah, but in business, you got to understand that at some point you need to know when the risk is too great. Right. Ooh. And so what was really interesting about that as a season finale is some people said, yes, I'll go. And other people said, no, I'm not willing to risk my life. And like at that level, to risk my life and limb and family and whatever. And it was just such a deep lesson for me. It was such a deep lesson that doing something like going skydiving. Yes, you're risking your life, but people do it every single day. I mean, you get in your car and drive down the street. You're risking your life, but in the car. Yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? But I think this idea of like, well, what's the worst case? And then, like you said, what could I do to prevent it? Well, I could go with a guide, not just randomly jump out of an airplane without a parachute. There's things I could do. And then if I did have an issue, how do I repair it? Well, maybe there's a secondary parachute. Maybe there's other ways to handle that problem. Maybe you go and take some classes first. You go indoor skydiving. Like there's ways that you can prepare yourself properly for it. But I think in business, I think that so many times people don't take those steps of preventative care, like mitigating their risk, and they don't know how to repair, right? So there's preventative care and then the ability to repair. And I think that idea of repair is where a lot of people get lost, is they just go, well, it's broken forever. There's nothing I can do.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. So those 3 steps are really, really critical. The other one that I would add and wrap up with in terms of kind of that process is also, because we talked about risk, and you don't want to take so much risk where you literally are in like really bad physical danger. That's not smart to do. Right. But most of the risks that we take are less about the things that we do. It's more about the things that we don't do. It's here's how I define it. Once you've defined your nightmare, you've listed out the things you can do to prevent it, the things you can do to prepare it. You want to actually measure and list out what's the cost of you not doing this? What's the cost of inaction? Because the cost of inaction is often far greater than the cost of action ever will be, right? If we think about, let's say somebody's watching this and they're in a job and they're not fulfilled and they're not happy, and they know they want to do something that brings more joy and more meaning to their life, and they want to launch a business. What if you were to let another year go by, another 3 years, 5 years, another 10 years of our finite life to go by where you don't pursue that vision? That cost to me is far greater than you taking the leap, than you stepping outside of your comfort zone. And when we look at that, that's where it quiets the fear. Because I always say, and I didn't come up with this, someone else did. I think it's brilliant. Fear, your intuition whispers when your fear shouts. Right, your intuition is a whisper. Your gut feeling is a whisper. It's quiet. Your fear is loud. And so when you look at the cost of inaction, you start raising the volume of your intuition, of your purpose, of your drive, of your motivation, and you start quieting the fear.
Dude, that is money. Wow. And I know, like you said, you're not taking credit for that, as you're saying, but that's brilliant. And just that framework of just understanding, like, what's the cost of inaction? I think people don't understand that no action is still a decision. Like we were actually, Holly and I were just on a call right before this, actually, we were talking about this, is that my goal is just to help people make a decision, right? Like, cause we were talking about people who like, well, should I go? Whatever the problem is. But I just said, my goal is just get them to a decision, right? Because when you're in decision, you're making progress, but by not doing anything, that is also a decision. that is creating the delay and hope. And I don't want to say hopefully, but the problem with delaying that decision is that then that delays your future. Right? When you put off that decision, to your point, you stay at a company, 3 years, like I was saying, I've done this before. I've literally stayed at companies probably 3 years longer than I should have because I'm just that loyal. I'm just that whatever. And it was like, oh man, like I probably should have left that situation a long time ago, or left that friendship, or left that relationship, or left that whatever long ago. Not because I want to be a quitter, but because, like to your point, is that what's the risk of staying?
No.
So
and I think that business owners do that all the time. Like, if I don't make that decision, I don't have to, and all that fear that goes with it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If you just put it off, then don't worry about it. It's fine. But like, that is a decision, is I'm putting it off, and like, it's costing me, my credibility. It's costing me other team members. It's costing me finances. It's costing me all those things. Peter, this has been super good, man. And I really appreciate you hanging out with us on this episode and talking about fear, because I think so many people can relate to this in a really positive way. I'd love to know in the comments what your biggest takeaway from today is. So do me a favor and comment in the comment section and just give some love to Peter. Peter, how can people track you down? What's your social? What's a website people can go to just if they want to go get more information about how to live without more fear?
Love it, Jason. Thank you, brother. Name's Peter Scott, the Force. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, just search that. You'll connect with me there. My website's designafearlesslife.com. So if you want to check out any experiences that we're doing, we host them there. We take people surfing, great white shark diving. We did with a couple of black belt members, Jason, a couple of years ago. So similar, we do very high adventure experiences to get people outside of their comfort zone, to break through levels in their business, in their health, and their relationships. So those are the two best places, designafearlesslife.com, and then just connect with me on social.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and put that link in the comments as well, and make sure people have access to all that stuff, Peter. But dude, as always, it's so good to hang out with you. I always learn something when we get a few minutes to hang out. So thank you so much for being here. As always, Holly, great to have you on with me today as well, just chatting with Peter and learning more about fear. Thank you so much for joining the show. Have a great day. Thank you guys so much. Peace.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us on today's show. If you want to get access to our 7-day Beautiful Minds Challenge, you can either comment below and just say 7-day, and I'll shoot you the information so you can get immediate access to that, or find me on any social media and just send me the message 7-day, and I'll make sure I get that out to you right away. And if you really enjoyed today's show, it would do me a huge favor if you went online, whether it was Spotify, Pandora, or iTunes, or any sort of podcast platform that you can find us on, and search for The Beautiful Minds Show, subscribe to our channel, and then make sure you give us a rating. Every time you give us a rating, it helps us get more eyeballs on our show and help more people have a more beautiful mind. Thanks again for joining us.